just to respect time. So my name is Megan Custer. I'm the Assistant Director of Orientation and Family Programs here at Eastern. And we are super excited today to have our Eagle Family Hour. So partnering with the Financial Aid Office and the Financial Wellness Program. So I'm going to introduce our speakers and then we are going to get started. So Candy Teeters, the Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships. And then we have Thurman Johnson, who is the Graduate Assistant for Financial Wellness, the Financial Wellness Program. So we are going to talk about today FAFSA. So you've completed it. Now what? What does that mean? So we're really excited to have both of our presenters here. And Candy, if you want to take it away, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. So welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about maybe you have current freshman students and you're just not quite sure what happens next with them in their future years of their higher education. So we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and talk about how it might be the same or how it might be different. First of all, just a little bit about me and why I'm so passionate about financial aid and the opportunities it can provide for families. I am a first-generation college student myself. I'm from a very small town outside of the Tri-Cities called Benton City, where college going wasn't super common. But for me, that was the path that I was fortunate enough to take. And if it hadn't been for financial aid and scholarship opportunities, I wouldn't have been able to do that and be where I am today. I've been in financial aid for a little bit. I'm on my 25th year here at Eastern, and I had a few years at a community college prior to this. So I'm pretty familiar with the opportunities that are out there, and really honored and happy to be here to help our students and families through those process, so I can help students and families like me move on to those next opportunities. So a little more in depth about what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk about what happens when, because that will look a little bit different in year 2 and beyond for you and your student. What's different about it, other costs, other variables that you need to consider as you're preparing your financial plan. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about special circumstances. That just means if things have changed since you filled out the FAFSA, what do you do and what does that mean? We'll talk about scholarship season. That's right now. Your students should be feverishly applying for all the scholarship opportunities they might possibly qualify for, to keep those options open for them as well. Lastly, I will briefly talk about financial planning, but then we'll turn it over to Thurman, who has far more information and details to provide to you and to share with your students from there. So a little bit about the calendar, where we're at now and what's going to happen over the next several months, getting us to fall quarter start in September. Hopefully by now, you and your student have completed the financial aid application for the upcoming school year, for the 2023-24 school year. The FAFSA is an annual requirement. FAFSA or WASFA is an annual requirement. It's not one and done for your student's college career. The process is a little easier in year 2 and beyond. A lot of the data that's in there, information about where your high school and your hometown and where you graduated from high school, that all automatically pushes over into the financial aid application again year to year. But the income information needs to be updated annually. So if you haven't done that process yet, it's not too late, but we encourage families to complete that as soon as possible, so we can make sure we provide all the possible financial aid opportunities that we can offer to you and your student. I mentioned scholarship season. So at Eastern, we have our own scholarship application. It's one application where students are applying for literally thousands of different scholarship awards. That application deadline has passed, unfortunately. It was February 1st. It's February 1st every year. If your student maybe missed it this year, it's something to put as a tickler on their calendar for them for next year. It opens by November 1st, and it's always closes on February 1st. It's a great opportunity. It's a fairly simple application, but it really is a great possibility for your students. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when I talk about scholarship season in just a bit. Also, right now is the time that private scholarships open up. So Kiwanis, local organizations, whatever you can think of, now is the time to be looking for those scholarship opportunities and applying for those. The bulk of the deadlines are right now, January, February through, some will go as late as May, most start to cut off in April, but now is the time to be doing those scholarship applications. And again, we're going to dig in a little deeper what that means, and I'm going to give you some tools and resources to use to pursue those options. Later, it says February, March. We're almost done with February, right? And you haven't had communications let. So yeah, so let's say March. If your student has already done their financial aid application, usually in the late winter, early spring is when we start to communicate with students in their year 2 and beyond. The cycle is earlier for freshman students just because the freshman cycle in general is different for students. So we're communicating earlier, we're sending aid notifications earlier in the freshman year than what you'll experience in other parts of your student's education. So just know that's normal. It's not unusual to be getting your information a little later. It's just how students are running through the system. So in the next month or so, if there's additional information that we need from your student, we'll start sending those communications out to make those requests. Actually, they're probably already getting some of them as well, but we don't actually set up the financial aid offer for your second year, and again, the cycle is similar in future years until roughly the latter part of May. We want to make sure that we have the most current information on costs, what our institutional costs are going to be for the next academic year, and we also want to have the most current and accurate information on as far as what's available from federal and state aid systems. A lot of those decisions aren't complete until legislative cycles are complete, which is going on right now in the state of Washington. So because of that, for example, we don't know for sure what our state aid availability is going to be for next year, and we don't know for sure what our tuition rates are going to be for next year. So we want to make sure your students have a very accurate picture of what their financial aid opportunities are. That's why we delay it a little bit getting that information out. So what should be happening with you and your student early summer as they're finishing up their first year here at Eastern is receiving those notifications, responding, accepting the aid that they wish to accept. So everything is ready to go when they show up for classes in September. A little bit additional items about what's different in the second year. So your student may be talking to you about living off campus next year. Maybe they were in a residence hall this year, and next year they want to move in with, 2 or 3 or 4 of their friends to experience the off-campus living situation. That's something when you do your financial planning, you need to account for how those costs might look different when you're living off campus versus on campus. So you have rent now, they have to go to the grocery store and purchase things for their meals, paying for utilities, so trash services and water services and all of those fun things. So Thurman will talk a little bit more about preparing those budgets and point you to resources that can provide those services, but just start thinking now about how the costs might look different in the next year, so if nothing else, just based on your students' change in living situation. If you and your students borrowed a student loan this year, in order to get that loan the first time, you had to do something called a master promissory note and loan entrance counseling. That is good for your student's lifetime as an undergraduate student here at Eastern Washington University. So if they transfer, don't do that or something like that. They might have to do the process again at a different school, but at Eastern, you're good. So when you get that aid offer, if you choose, you've done your budget and you feel like a student loan is the right decision for you, the process is as simple as that. Just telling us, yep, I want to accept that aid for the next year. There's no additional parts that you have to complete. So it's a little easier in the second year and beyond. Scholarships, if your student received an automatic scholarship from Eastern last school year, so Dean's Scholarship, for example, that's a multi-year commitment as long as your student meets their academic obligation. Those are automatically reviewed in July after grades for the school year have all been posted and we have access to that information. And those additional awards will automatically be added to your student's financial aid offer for the next year. Nothing they need to do. Well, we want to make sure they're getting good grades all school year, right? But there's no additional steps that they need to take in order to get that multi-year scholarship in year 2 and beyond. We do all that work for them. Another important thing to keep in mind for your students, particularly for Eastern scholarships, but even private ones, once they get into year 2 and beyond, they've probably narrowed in on what their academic major is going to be. Once they make that determination, that will also open up additional scholarship opportunities for them. For example, a student majoring in education, planning to be a teacher, we have lots of scholarships specifically for our education related majors. So when that decision is made, that will open up some additional doors for your students when it comes to scholarship opportunities. The last thing is something called satisfactory academic progress. And basically that's just a measure that financial aid has to watch to make sure your student is passing their classes and staying on track to timely degree completion in order to continue to receive their financial aid. After their freshman year, there are these 3 additional items that are up on your screen that we'll also be watching for. So in the first year, we're really focused on, passing those classes, but in the subsequent years, there's a pace that they have to keep. So there's a percentage of completion that they have to keep. There's a GPA minimum that they have to complete. And overall, going continuously, they have 6 years or less within which to complete that work. Right now, it's about 5 years for state aid. So just something to keep in the back of your head. I certainly hope that all your students are being successful academically and you don't need to even worry about this, but it's important to know that there are other variables that will be monitored for them in their second year and beyond. I mentioned earlier, if your situation has changed since you submitted the FAFSA, or the information on that FAFSA is going to be your 2020, what year are we in? Tax information. If that's no longer accurate, talk with our office. Give us a call, contact us, and let's talk through what that means and what that looks like. That could change your family's eligibility for financial aid if your situation has changed. So maybe you have more family members, or someone's income situation has changed. You have unusual expenses that you don't normally have. Those are all the variables that we want to talk with you about to see if we want to make sure we're giving you the most financial aid that we can, and these can have an impact on that decision. So just give us a call. We'll set you up an appointment with one of our advisors and we can talk through what that means and what the next steps might be for your student and your family. Scholarship season, hooray, it's my favorite time of year. What I encourage all students is that they should be seeking every possible scholarship opportunity that they can. The nice thing about scholarships is most applications ask for the same thing, maybe with a little bit of different bow on it, maybe a little bit additional detail. But if you have these 5 main items that are up on your screen here, that's going to give your student most of the information that they need to apply for many scholarships, not just one. An essay about them, what they've done, where they're going, what their plan is. I call it an academic resume. So even if your student hasn't worked, they can talk about their academic accomplishments. So awards and honors, if they've done more difficult curriculum like advanced placement kind of curriculum, their leadership, service, involvement, all the other things that they might be doing beyond their schooling, letters of recommendation, I tell students have at least one on hand. Some scholarships will ask for more than one, but if at least you have a starting point by having one on file, and most recommenders are willing to give the person they're writing that for a copy of that recommendation. And lastly, a copy of their academic transcripts, having those on file.
Can I
Sorry.
interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
I only see you. I don't see a screen, and then I just saw several chats that say the same thing.
Oh, uh-oh. Did I do something wrong? Okay, hold on just a second here. Let me stop share. Okay, can you see it now?
There we go.
Okay, well,
Yes.
my apologies. You've just been having to look at me all this time. So sorry about that. Okay, so I gotta shift things over here so I'm looking at you and not Okay, so now that you can see it, the top 5 items on your screen are the 5 baseline items that you want to make sure your student wants to make sure that they have on hand that will help them readily apply for multiple scholarships. The bottom part of that screen are just my tips on ways to maximize all the different scholarship opportunities. I tell families, make sure you're checking with all the places with whom you do business, your bank, your insurance provider, your internet provider, your cell phone provider, your place of employment. Students are most successful in scholarship searches when they search local and regional. There are some great national scholarships. You know, Coca-Cola does a $20,000 per year scholarship, but there's literally thousands of students applying for those awards. So the likelihood that your student will be selected is diminished just based on that sheer volume. Versus if you're looking locally in particular, the pools are much smaller and your odds of receiving those scholarships are much higher. The other thing I tell students is you should be applying for more than one. It's not a one and done scenario. You should be treating it sort of like a part-time job. You know, invest your time, apply for all those scholarships that might possibly be available, just to keep those opportunities open. And again, emphasizing once they decide their academic discipline, that's going to open up more opportunities as well. The last thing is ensure that your student knows when the deadlines are. Scholarship deadlines are about 99.9% of the time fixed. They're not going to change. So if your student misses the deadline, they're going to miss out on that opportunity. I'm old-fashioned. I keep a paper calendar on things like that for my own children, making sure they stay on task and complete their scholarship applications by those deadlines. So whatever it takes for your student, just make sure that they're not missing those deadlines, because they won't have the opportunity to do so if they miss out on that date. One additional scholarship plug. So there's a scholarship opportunity exclusively for Washington residents called the Washington Opportunity Scholarship. It's an incredible opportunity. It offers students a $2,500 scholarship in their freshman and sophomore year. It jumps up to $7,500 in their junior year, and then oddly it drops back down, but it's still $5,000 in their senior year. So it's a significant award for students majoring in any STEM or healthcare related field. If this is a possibility for your student, I guide everyone to WashingtonOpportunityscholarship.org. It has the details on who qualifies, all the different majors that might be considered. There is an income eligibility component, but it's a pretty high threshold. So there is a significant number of students that are eligible for this opportunity, and it's an award that they can use through their entire higher education. It's just not a one-year scholarship. So it's a really great opportunity. Oops. Lastly is now is the time to be preparing your students should be preparing their financial plan. Talking about all the things that I already mentioned, if they're going to be living on campus, how those costs are different and how they're prepared to pay those. Having a good feel of what's a realistic cost versus unrealistic costs. I don't know if that's the right way to frame it, but just making sure that they're accounting for all possible costs that they have to pay and all possible sources of income. Thurman's going to go into a little more depth on this and the variables to account for. And also here at Eastern, we do have a financial wellness team that can help students with things like budgeting, either pointing you to the tools to use to do that, or even having a one-on-one time with your student to prepare that so that they're adequately prepared when they return to school in September, and when it comes to student loan borrowing, that they're really thoughtful about the amounts that they're borrowing just what they need to cover those real expenses. So our office, we're located in Sutton Hall on our campus. We're open every weekday, Monday through Friday. We also offer one-on-one 30-minute appointments for students and their families if your situation is unique, or if you just have questions, you're not sure what to do next. We're readily available. We usually have appointments next business day. So it's fairly easy to get in touch with us to provide whatever additional support you and your families might need. So we'll turn it over to see if anyone has any questions for me before we move on to Thurman. I'm going to leave my screen up for just a second so you can take a quick snapshot.
Hi, I do have a question.
And I'm going to stop my share. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm looking at my notes to find what it was. You talked about majors that are open, or scholarship opportunities for certain majors. Once they declare the major, will they be notified about these scholarships, or do they have to seek them out?
For Eastern Scholarship, it will happen automatically if they've done the general university application. In addition to that, some departments have their own scholarship process. So once they've made that determination, I'm going to be an engineering major, for example, I also encourage students to follow up with the department to ask that question. Do you have any other scholarships for which I can apply? So no, it's not always proactively communicated to the student at the department level. So I encourage students to be the one to ask that question.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question, and I know this is really basic and maybe a silly question, but how do you get a student loan? Do you go to your bank? Do you go through the university?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it all starts with the financial aid application with the FAFSA. Once your student has completed a FAFSA and it's been received by the school, a student loan is typically one of the things that we offer as part of the total financial aid package. If your student maybe declined it and now wants it, or just never responded to it, just follow up with our office and we can walk you and your student through how to access that student loan. There are limits on how much you can get by school year, and we can talk through those things as well. So it's all done at the school level for federal loans. If your student has hit those limits, but still has a need to help pay for the rest of their costs, there's options also at the federal level via a parent loan where you would be the borrower for benefit of your student. Or if you choose not to go that path, there's private loans. Private loans is where you would go to your bank. I always encourage families, check with your credit union or whomever you bank with to see what student loan, educational loans they might have to offer. But those are typically, they're not guaranteed. They can be higher interest rates. They don't qualify for forgiveness programs. For example, if your student's a teacher in a high need area, they may qualify for forgiveness programs under the federal umbrella. So I always encourage students to maximize the federal loan options first before moving on to the private loan options.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. It looks like someone asked in the chat, can scholarships, Let me ask this question and answer this question, and then we can switch back to you, April. Can scholarships be used to pay off campus living? Any financial aid source that you have here at Eastern, whether it's a grant or a loan or a scholarship, it's always going to go pay Eastern charges first, which includes tuition and fees. We're seeing more and more books post through the student account too for your students that use web-based books, but also on-campus living. So if they have that resource, yes, it is going to go apply towards those charges before any leftover funds are given to the student. April, go ahead. You had a question.
Sorry, I'm in the shop. It's really loud. So my son qualified for the College Board Scholarship. We signed him up when he was a freshman. He's starting in the fall of this year. How does that work? How does that tie in, or do I need to make a one-on-one appointment so he can understand how it works?
Yeah, so College Bound, I believe you're talking about the College Bound scholarship that students get. Most of them are signed up in their middle school years based on certain qualifications. Those awards should be automatically set up by the school, but again, it's based on the financial aid application data. So as long as your student has done a financial aid application, it should automatically be part of the financial aid offer that they receive. What can be really confusing, especially for freshman families, the first time going through this, the way state of Washington funds that program is there's a big umbrella called state financial aid, and it's made up of multiple sources. It's made up of something called Washington College Grant. It's made up of the College Bound Scholarship, and it's also made up of a new program called the Bridge Scholarship. So as a financial aid office, all schools through the state of Washington, we have to maximize Washington College Grant first for our college bound students. So you'll see, approximately a $7,000 award under the umbrella of Washington College Grant. And then you'll see another $700 to $900 award under the umbrella of College Bound Scholarship. It's really confusing for our families because the College Bound commitment is tuition and books, but $700 doesn't cover tuition and books. So you have to add those two components together, that Washington College Grant and College Bound Scholarship, to get your total commitment from the College Bound Award. But if you have questions about it, again, we're always here to help. That's what we do. So give us a call and set up an appointment, and we'll be happy to walk through it with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we turn it over to Thurman? All right.
All righty. I'll go ahead and begin sharing my screen. Okay, can everyone see that? Great, cool. So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Thurman Johnson. I'm a graduate student assistant with Eastern Washington University's Financial Wellness Program. And so today I'll be giving you a sort of a brief overview of what that program is, what it is that we do. And then I'll briefly dip into some more specific information. Today I decided to touch on budgeting since I felt like that was most relevant to what we were talking about today. But before I get started, actually, I wanted to touch on the Washington Opportunity Scholarship that Candy mentioned. I actually was a recipient of the Washington Opportunity Scholarship in my undergrad studies, and it was a big part in why I was able to afford my undergraduate education. And I can't recommend it enough to anyone that's considering applying for scholarships if you're in an eligible field. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I saw that in Candy's presentation. So with that, so Eastern Washington University's Financial Wellness Program is a relatively new program. It's a Title III grant-funded initiative. We actually went into soft launch just about 1 year ago. And what we do is we help students with fact-finding. We clarify terminology. We provide information on things like budgeting, And we also verify outside resources for students. But what we don't do is offer financial advice. So I'm a financial peer mentor. I'm not a financial advisor. So there's no shoulds and should nots in our conversation. It's mostly clarification and explanation. And so what that looks like is this is a student peer mentoring program. So I myself am a graduate student, but we also have an undergraduate student that is certified as a financial peer mentor. And we provide one-on-one confidential sessions with Eastern students. And they can ask us questions about pretty much anything that pertains to their finances. That can be as it pertains to their schooling or just in their personal life, their financial health. So any questions pertaining to that, we will either try to answer it, or we will refer them to an on-campus department if we feel like it's more appropriate for the students' questions, or we can go on fact-finding missions with them online and verify the validity of resources that we use to answer the students' questions. And so this is kind of a visualization of the scenario that we're trying to rectify. So you have a student with a question, and they've got all these resources in front of them, and they're not really sure which resources are valid, what information is valid, and often that can add to the confusion and the stress of the situation. And so what we do is we, basically try and make sense of that for them and with them. We say, that's not really a good place to be looking for those answers. This would be a great resource for you, or I can provide information on that, right here in this conversation. And so, like I said before, that often involves making referrals to students or for students to on-campus departments. Really common referrals include student financial aid. When students come to us with really specific questions about their financial aid, we don't have the ability to go into the back end of things necessarily and discuss the more nitty-gritty details. And so we usually pass them off to financial aid. And then likewise, when students have questions pertaining to their balances for their student accounts, we'll pass them off to student financial services and other relevant departments as needed. And then importantly, down at the bottom of this list, we maintain a basic record of our appointment content. And the reason that we do that is we like to give students a warm handoff. So when students come to us and they have questions and it's not best suited for our program, we don't want to just say, well, this is where you need to go, good luck. We keep a record of that. And oftentimes we actually ourselves will facilitate the transition for that student. I send emails on behalf of students and make contact for them and basically help relay that information, because oftentimes when students have questions, if they're stressed out about what they're asking about, the last thing that they want to do is bounce around from place to place and having to ask their question over and over again or tell their story over and over again. So this is what we do to help mitigate that. And so what qualifies us to speak to students as being students ourselves? Well, so the fundamental certification that we have is the FinCert Certified Financial Peer Mentor course. And so this is a third-party accreditation program that all mentors go through before they begin coaching students. But in addition to that, we basically take any opportunity that we can to enhance our abilities to work with the student body. And so, this past year, myself and our other peer mentor have gone through cross-trained with other tutors on campus. We have gone through diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and we've also gone through LGBTQ+ advocate and undocumented community awareness training. And so pretty much any other available trainings on campus that are available, you can expect us to attend those. And so these are commonly covered topics for us. We've just recently expanded our ability to speak on taxes. We're just speaking to a group about that, but we also have talked about credit health, savings accounts, or just account basics in general. More commonly, it's financial terminology and budgeting. Budgeting is a big part of what we speak with students about. we can break down their expenses with them in a one-on-one session, and their income, and we can make a spreadsheet right then and there. And at the end of the session, I can send that to them in an email, and they can have that to either enact if they feel good about it, or they can continue working on it, or we can return to that at a later session and make adjustments as needed. And so, like I said, the budgeting is what I was going to talk about today. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and just start kind of speaking on that at this point. So sort of, basically speaking, the main budget components are income, taxes, and expenses. And so income would be after taxes, and then you would factor in your expenses. And pretty much what you do is you subtract your expenses from your income, and then you have your available money. And so if your budget doesn't balance, then after subtracting your expenses from your income, you have a negative value. And so that would be like a typical scenario when a student comes to us. They say, I'm spending more money than I'm making, or here's what I'm making, and I have these large expenses, and I need to figure out how to make this work. And so that's where a budget comes in, where you lay out all of these expenses, you lay out all of your sources of income, and you identify where changes can be made, and numerically calculate how those changes would affect your budget's ability to be balanced. And then, of course, the most important part in the process is to actually follow through with the changes that you calculate while balancing your budget. And so the basic expense types that we teach with students are fixed, variable, periodic, and discretionary. So fixed expenses would be something like rent. So that's a fixed value at a set frequency. So that's a recurring payment at a regular time at the same value each time. Something like groceries would be a variable expense. So you're making expenses on average at a similar frequency, but the values might change. And so that could also include something like gas expenses. Those can be kind of difficult to calculate. And so sometimes when students come to us and we need to come up with a value for that, we can either give our best estimate in the moment, or if there's time to kind of get a more accurate number associated with that, we can go to the student's bank statements and make calculations based on their previous spending habits, or we can make a plan to reconvene in a month, and that student records their expenses for those or their expenditures for those expense types, and then we calculate an average amount to use. So then you have periodic expenses that as the name implies, occur periodically. They don't occur at a regular frequency, and these ones can be pretty difficult to plan for. An example would be something like auto maintenance. Things like this they can sometimes be a significant amount of money, and so they are important to consider, but they're not always the easiest thing to calculate. And then lastly, we have discretionary expenses, and these would be well, I put coffee here, so that would be a good example. If you're out and about and you decide to go purchase a coffee, right? Or you're at the store picking up groceries, but you decide, well, I'd like a candy bar, or I'd like an energy drink or something like that. That would be a discretionary expense. And oftentimes, when we lay out a student's expenses, discretionary expenses are some of the easiest areas to trim. But I'll talk about a little bit about that in more detail on why we don't coach students on cutting discretionary expenses entirely. So here's sort of a visual of what this might look like when you lay out a student's financial situation. So on the left here, I have a list. This would be their income, so working part-time, and then below that we have their expenses. Renting an apartment, that would be a fixed expense. Paying for Wi-Fi, another fixed expense. Gas expenses would be, again, a periodic. Buying textbooks could be considered, gas expenses would be a variable. I misspoke there. Buying textbooks could be considered a variable expense. And then auto maintenance, again, periodic. And And then the rest below, streaming subscriptions, would probably be a fixed expense, and then daily copy purchases would be discretionary. And so what we do is we would take something like that, and then we go through each of them. We see what can be changed, what can't be changed, because you can't make alterations to every single aspect of your financial situation. And so what that looks like is on the right. So just like an important part of the budget is expenses, it's also income. And so if someone's working part-time, we might explore well, can you fit in working a few more hours to increase the income end of things. For that Wi-Fi plan, can we downsize to a less expensive option? If you're spending a lot of money on gas, is carpooling an option? If you're buying textbooks new, can you buy them used, right? So these are like all the possibilities that we run through in our conversations with students, with the goal of sort of whittling down those expenses and making their budget balanced. And so down at the bottom here, I want to touch on the copy purchases and why I don't have that change to just not buying coffee, or whatever discretionary expenses in there. And something like that can be really important for maintaining student motivation, actually, for sticking to their budget. And so we don't tell students to drop all discretionary expenses, because you need a little joy in your life. And so if that is a weekly coffee purchase, then so be it. We want them to have that. And so, at the spreadsheet level, this is what that looks like. So on the left, we have, current expenses numbered out, and then we have the monthly total of what they're spending. And then we have revised expenses with the values calculated at new amounts, and what that monthly total is under the revised plan. And then we have the revisions, listed out below as well, with the values that they remove from their expenditures. And then on the right, we have income being calculated. These are monthly figures, but then financial aid on that third row of income is a total amount. And then we have results. And so, usually we have this set up so that if you change values in any of the expenses, it automatically changes the totals, and then it goes over and automatically changes the results. And so the money after expenses, you can have like sort of a live feed of that as you're making changes. And then you can also factor in something like a savings account contribution. This particular scenario is that I created is a student that's trying to pay down credit card debt, right? And so they're trying to figure out, okay, with my current expenses and with my current income, what's the maximum contributions to my debt payments I can make on a monthly basis, right? And so that's the scenario under which this example budget was created. And so that sort of concludes my presentation. And so I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And with that, I'll open to any questions that you may have for me.
Thurman, can you drop the financial wellness website into the chat for folks to share with their students?
Yep.
If no one has a question, I have one that I kind of thought of beforehand that would be fun to ask. I think that was a great presentation, Thurman. I think budgeting is so important to talk about to your college student. But I think either Thurman or Candy, if you have experience or just tips on how to talk about budgeting to your student, and then also how to keep them accountable for that while also, maybe allowing them to fail a little bit and learn on their own.
Yeah, if talking about making a financial plan is not something that has been a part of your conversational dynamic with your student, it can certainly be difficult or maybe even daunting to kind of approach initially. I would just encourage sort of an open line of communication, just kind of a sort of an atmosphere of teamwork, right? Like, okay, let's both figure this out together, right? We have these questions, I have these questions, you have these questions, so together we have these questions, and we're going to figure out these answers together. And, let's talk about what we learned together. I didn't know that. That's interesting to me. And, I wonder what that might mean for this, those are just, generalities, but I think that general approach would be most effective.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Oh, Candy, did you have something to add?
No, I was just going to add. So I asked Thurman to drop the website into the chat. So if it is maybe a daunting subject to discuss with your student, just making them aware of the resources that are here on campus, particularly because it's peer-to-peer, I think it adds a level of comfort for the students to have someone that's in their shoes, so to speak, with whom to have those conversations. So that might be an easy win to, hey, did you even know that this existed? Wow, I saw it. It was a great tool. They offer really wonderful resources, and make sure that they're even aware that this opportunity is out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to say too, like, it is a resource that we have on campus, which is so cool and special that, is accessible to all Eastern students. So even if they were to go in with a friend and, make an appointment together or that kind of thing, I think there's power in numbers and power in just going in with someone who you're comfortable with too. So awesome. Any other last burning questions before we conclude for today? Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you both, Candy and Thurman, for presenting, and thank you all for attending today. Look out for more presentations like this in the future. And if you have any ideas for topics or things that you would like to hear about, please email us, and we would be happy to make that a topic and something that, that would be interesting to other families. So
Thank you so much.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.